Yes, we are back for another episode of the Black Stitch Hockey Podcast. And I'm going to open this up with a moment of silence for the Arizona Coyotes, as Alex Marullo has officially relinquished his rights and holdings to the organization's branding and the team. So pour one out for the Desert Dogs. Got a little bit of a slow load in on Liam. There we go. Definitely a little bit of a technical glitch on my side as a meta notification rolled in right across the live stream, and we all know how touchscreen technology works. Ah. Oh, what a time to be alive. As I get 10 million notifications, but we are good to go. We are now into what is known as the quiet season of the off season. We're not as much NHL content and the like are going on, but we are into an era where the PWHL continues to get as much bad press as physically possible out in the Midwest. For the most part, I have avoided covering any of those headlines or really touching it with a 10-foot pole out of the journalistic integrity by not talking about it does as much as talking about it. And now I'm going to open the floor up to, I guess, Liam, if there's a topic that you're really fiending to get out there to open up our week.
Yeah. So this is a talking point that occurred to me pretty recently, and it's an interesting reflection, especially I might have the most to really circulate and put forward as a strong thought. But I thought it was amusing and sort of self-aware of the AHL to basically tweet, does anybody even want the schedule reveal at this point? The admin actually put that out there as a preface to when those schedules were starting to be revealed. Not those exact words, but pretty much with that exact veneer. And I was just and there was a reply right underneath from a Hershey Bears fan that really drove the point home. Yeah, I can't wait for us to be facing Lehigh Valley 152 times and Wilkes-Barre Scranton 300 times this year. And it's just man, you kind of have to contemplate. I understand why it happens because it's not easy for those teams to afford the travel costs, especially with them not having a lot of their own money, as it's become increasingly standard for the affiliate to no longer exist. And basically all those clubs being owned by their NHL parent club in an increasing fashion. But I was just man, it is tough thinking about that quandary that they're in. It's because it reminds me of the CHL a little bit and how that can become a very stagnant dev environment for players. In this case, it's because you're playing the same teams over and over again, often within your own division, and like with very few interconference matchups, very few interdivisional matchups even. And it's like, is the AHL becoming a stagnant dev environment? And is there anything that can be done about it?
Yeah, definitely a good talking point and a good thinking point there. Um, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I do think to some degree, and it's an interesting balance in dev leagues and even like second tier professional leagues. Maybe to echo your sentiments, maybe in a different direction or in the same direction. I think you're right, and really in what you're saying there. But like, people, and I remember coming out of the Canadian pandemic and that crazy Battle of Alberta playoff series, where like at the top professional level, like sure, seeing the same teams, like if the Oilers and the Flames played each other 10 times in a row, all 10 games would sell out and it'd be an absolute fucking gong show that everybody would be lining up to witness. But like when you think of it at the semi-professional level, where player dev is so important, and the junior level, where once again player dev, so like playing against the same team and the same dudes consistently doesn't really like. Sure, iron sharpens iron, but playing the same teams and the same dudes and the same opponents so consistently, I feel like you get a little bit lazy in player dev, where the same tactics and strategies are just going to consistently be utilized, and like the depth of the skill and the range of ability of your opponent being so banal due to the lack of inconsistency in the schedule, really, it just makes it so difficult to get valuable player dev. Where like as I started doing some of my off-season recaps, like um, looking at Chicago's first round picks and just being of the mindset that like Boisvert is going to be in a better spot than the other kid they took at the end of the first, solely because he's making the jump to UND instead of spending another year in the O or in the USHL, which nevertheless, by moving to the NCAA, the variety of opponents and oppositions just better to gauge whether or not this guy is going to be able to get his skills to transcend really to the next level. Where and I say this as in all my prospect evals, like the biggest question mark for all these kids coming out of juniors in the draft is their offensive skill set going to transfer against a higher grade or a more diversified grade of competition, where all these dudes who are already scoring at a pretty fantastic clip in the O or the dub or the Q or the USHO for that matter aren't, like, we're not learning anything we didn't already know.
Yeah. Which is why, like, there's so much value to see someone cultivated in a dev trajectory that presents a diverse and unique breadth of different challenges and environments and such. And now, like, heck, I think one of the biggest things, of course, we see him at defectors because Boisvert in and of himself, like he's Quebecois, but opted to go to the USHL to NCAA route. But like, um, I think part of why the future bodes well for USA hockey products is like, the USHL has been declared by different administrators of theirs, like their objective now is to get kids pro ready as soon as possible, rather than being a standard NCAA dev feeder. Although if they do say, like, if anyone who comes up in our ranks decides the NCAA route is the right one for them, then that's great as well. But our objective is to get them as pro ready as possible. And with that, the funding going into that increasing, like it's becoming more viable on its own standing, and then of course, the NCAA environment, and in some of the blue blood programs, you see probably a more diverse and unpredictable schedule of opponents by percentage than even in the AHL, possibly. Not to mention like having to prep, once the national tournament comes around for teams you've never seen before, sometimes throughout most of that process, like that it's something like that where there's inherent adaptability both in the moment and in prep and in training. Those are the best things that can come from. So now it's becoming like apparent, and it's kind of felt that way for me to me for a while, that the AHL just is it's very much turning guys into blunt instruments. Like I just like am not very impressed by its capabilities there. Not to say that some guys, like if they're making a certain transition, it hasn't helped them, but overall, I'm just like not really. I'm starting to become less and less impressed by it by a dev environment as a dev environment by itself.
Yeah, I think that really where the A has value, and really its value is more niche than it was before, in my um, point of view. Where I look at like a guy like the AHL truly is at its most valuable for CHL products at age 20, 21. And, for non-dev is great for, your 27 to 33-year-old dudes who just, want to make a six-figure income playing the sport while they can, 70 to 100 to 200K, I think is the salary range. So, I think for 21, like 20 to 22-year-old guys who, have never been, um, and a guy I think of who's going to be really good for the San Diego Gulls, not this coming season, but the year after, is probably going to be Beckett Seneca. Like, he's your ideal like guy who feeds into the AHL, where once he adjusts to his growth spurt, once he gets another year under his belt in the C, he's very, very, very likely going to need to get reps playing against guys who are as big as him and as fast as him to really sharpen his athleticism and how it applies to, professional hockey. Like we saw this with Olin Zellweger last year in Anaheim and San Diego, where like he needed those reps to adjust to the higher like degree of physicality you're going to get out of the AHL that you're not going to get in the C. But aside from that specific scenario, like most dudes coming out of the NCAA, the only thing they're going to see in the A that they didn't necessarily see at the collegiate level, depending on their conference, of course. If you're playing Big Ten or Hockey East or ECAC, like it's a little bit different because the parity is pretty solid for the most part, where there's at least 5 or 6 highly competitive teams. But like for if you're those guys coming over to the A first, like you're the biggest difference is the goaltending ability. Like across the board, like the top goalies in Hockey East are basically like mid-tier ish goalies in the A. Like you're just to use the modern A as an example. Like there isn't a Yaroslav Askarov looming in fucking Hockey East right now, and you're not going to see guys like him or Jesper Wallstedt level, talent in terms of athleticism. And like these guys are currently like 1B, 2A guys in the NHL. So like the only thing an NCAA guys really getting out of time in the A at this point, I think, is playing with in like every defender you play against is really smart, and every goalie you play against is really good.
Yeah, I think there might be also some value that, like, positionally, like if we're looking at skaters, like defensemen, like probably can benefit from those reps the most out of perhaps any position. Especially like when you want the pathway being sort of standardized to like your best grasp of that guy is going to be like what he is like uh, in his D+3 season, and in that environment, like you're having him get the pro reps, but you're doing it in a careful manner in which like he's not thrown to the wolves, and you're gonna maybe even when he gets called up, like he's not seeing top 4 minutes right away either. Because like we're talking like these guys maybe come into their, you know, they start to hit their stride maybe only very shortly before goaltenders do in their dev. So it does depend on individual needs relative to specific position as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, it's impressive too, because I mean, I know especially with like goaltending in the A too. I mean, we've seen some kids because Cam Ward, and his rookie season, he jumped from the AHL to play with the Hurricanes and lead them to the Cup, right? Was that the same season?
Yeah.
Do you guys know?
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, like, it's like to go on like your point, Christian. Like, obviously, again, you do see a lot of the talent with goaltending, and some of the players who do get that development, and then you see him jump and obviously be able to kind of help carry that team.
Yeah, his case was kind of unique because I think he did have a full season in the A under his belt in that lockout year where you're facing a higher quality of competition because a lot of guys are there that wouldn't normally be there, which is useful for goaltenders because you're facing a lot of harder shots than normal. But like it definitely was like a pretty fast track, even with all factors considered. Yeah, that is definitely like a reflection point worth having, like, about what that can bring to them facing pro level shots, etc.
It is really interesting that you bring up Cam Ward specifically because he's still one of the stranger goalies, I think, in league history. Like, if you ignore, like, in a vacuum, if that team doesn't go on and win the Stanley Cup in 05-06, I don't even really know if he ends up being their starter in the long haul. Because, like, what's really not spoken to is, like, he was actually fairly fucking underwhelming during his stint in the NHL that year before the playoffs with a minus 14.7 GSAA. Like, Cam Ward didn't even really break out as a legitimate goaltender in the NHL until, like, his 4th year in the league, which is kind of, like, crazy to think about that he was a negative GSAA in 05-06, 06-07, and 07-08.
Yeah,
like,
that's great.
He was subpar. And if it wasn't for, not for nothing playing behind what was a fairly loaded veteran team with a lot of respectable high hockey IQ like two-way players, definitely interesting narratives, especially provided that as good as Cam Ward was, he only did make the playoffs twice in his NHL career.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I feel like Cam Ward being considered a playoff great is almost like, and I'm going to talk some shit here for a second towards a current NHL player a little, like hearing people sing the praises of Cam Ward's career postseason work is whenever I see some fucking bathwater drinker on NHL Network calling Tyler Bertuzzi a playoff hockey player. And I stand here and say, what playoff hockey? Show me all of his highlight film from the second round.
Yeah.
And hey, man,
Yeah, maybe it's just...
good on the Chicago Blackhawks. Because I don't know if they're going to play any second-round playoff hockey in the 5 years he's under contract there.
I feel like a lot of it's just like, because of his name, I just feel like a lot of people want to talk about him and remember him being talked about in the playoffs. But like you said, I mean, That's the only thing I can really think of where he's like that, considered like a marquee player. But I mean, all they do is talk about him in the pre-games and the post-games and playoffs. But again, obviously, to your credit, I mean, he really doesn't have any of those highlight moments when, you know, you would assume that he would because of what everybody's always expecting and talking about.
Like, for fuck's sake, man, the guy played how many years in Detroit, and Todd Bertuzzi fucking found his way out of the first round, and that's for that fucking franchise more often than he did? Like, it's crazy. It's despicable. Kind of like, and I'm gonna throw some shade at our boy Mike Bartner over on Twitter, ranking his top 10 U23 players to build a franchise around. And this is really just a Ducks homer take that I'm getting sick and fucking tired of seeing, man. People have got to get off of fucking Carlson's dick at this point. Like, I don't know when this started, but the amount of Carlson knob slobbery that has gone on in a world where Mason McTavish is clearly the best fucking center on that roster at this point and is only like 2 years older. Like, I get it. Carlson was a top 3 pick. I get it. He was a second overall pick. I have no idea why Ducks and hockey media on Twitter looks at a guy who played sheltered minutes and couldn't stay healthy for more than 50 fucking games. Somehow is a better fucking centerpiece than a guy who's great defensively, has an A on his sweater, and was in top 2 on the team in fucking points per game last year. Like, I don't know when and where the fuck this started, but like the Mason McTavish oversight is just like, I get that the Ducks are shit. Like, I get we're a fucking awful team, but like, tell me you don't watch this awful team without telling me you don't watch this awful fucking team.
When people have actually bothered to break down McTavish's game, the thing that I've heard, and there might be a degree of truth to, is that it's that he does have certain restrictions in that he has like a very specific tool set, which is sometimes like you can see that it really can only be maximized when the environment of his mind lends itself to that. But the thing is that I've always thought that while the path for stardom to him is narrow, like he's very clearly capable of walking it and has very fucking well, considering the the limitations of the team that he's been on this entire time.
Like, I've watched his growth from his D0 to spending some time very briefly with the San Diego Gulls to his time, all 3 years where he has seen ice time at the professional, like at the top pro level, and like the guy has just improved his game every single year.
Yeah.
Like, he's far exceeded whatever I fucking thought he was gonna be. Like, it's just like just blows my mind. And like, I have nothing against Leo Carlson, but like, he's not. His path to stardom is just as equally ominous as McTavish due to the fact that he has, limitations that were well documented by most, scouts and analysts. And for the reason why pretty much everybody had him in a fucking heads or tails with Will Smith coming out of junior. Like, wild to me how, because and the reason why I think I have this sentiment, especially with Carlson, and you and I have talked about this a lot in the past, of treating prospects like they're gods, and really just like putting just unfair expectations on these guys. We're like trying to put Leo Carlson in, like, to come out here and be like, oh, he's better than Fantilli, he has a better upside than Demidov, like, yeah, he's not quite Mishka, and it's just. It's not a fair expectation to a guy who we're where there's a guy on his roster who plays the same position, who's got McTavish's trajectory exists. We have a 3-year window of his trajectory and his growth.
Yeah.
With Carlson, we have 55 NHL games. And it's to a point where people are getting the carriage ahead of the horses on him. And it's kind of the same thing that happened to Gauthier when he was in Philadelphia. To no fault of anyone's, of the expectations for what he was going to be just got so out of proportion, where Anaheim fans are just like, hey, he'll be a top 6 left winger maybe. But even they're starting to like, and it's just this unfair for prospects of all teams, really. Like, the only guy on Bartner's list that's in like, the only 2 guys Bartner has on his list that I don't feel any sort of way about is Wyatt Johnston and Connor Bedard, because Bedard's proven what he is. And, you know, Wyatt Johnston, like, unlike everybody else, has actually been on a deep playoff run.
Yep.
Good old Wyatt Johnston.
Yeah, so Ryan Suter signed in St. Louis. There was $775,000 for 1 year.
Oh, Suter, yeah.
Yeah.
Just another fan base for him to disappoint.
I mean, it's an interesting signing when, I mean, obviously, again, we talked about that blue line, but
Aging veteran blue line somehow gets slower and older. Yep.
yeah, it's a good move.
When I get to my St. Louis Blues off-season recap, whether or not I even fucking talk about it's its own thing. Is Ryan Suter a notable signing? Sure, he's about as notable as Pat Maroon going to the Blackhawks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know what St. Louis is doing these days.
Just banking it off of Robert Thomas. Let him just do his thing and, you know, hope he gets to a playoff spot. They did give Vucevic an extension too, though, didn't they? Did they pay him?
Buknajevic? Yeah, they gave Buknajevic, but, like, you know, the problem is the St. Louis Blues are just the Calgary Flames in a trench coat on stilts of, like, we have an aging, underwhelming roster with a handful of decent prospects that we're not sure what we're going to do, and, like I look at the St. Louis roster just like last year, and I'm going to get into disagreements with their fan base like last year, of just like Otto Stenberg not ready to play in the NHL, won't make much of a difference this year. You know, 50-50 shot Dalibor Dvorsky is on their NHL roster and making a significant notable impact. Like, heads or tails whether Zach Bolduc does anything at any level, you know. Again, like, Theo Lindstein probably not going to be a factor in the NHL for at least 3 years. You know, Matt Kessel was a low-level factor. Like, Hunter Skinner's a low factor, like, bottom 4D. Like, the Blues don't have the veteran/prime age core outside of Thomas and Kyrou up front to fucking do anything. And they should do what Calgary's doing and tear it down and trade these guys, with the exception, obviously, of Thomas and Kyrou, and just fucking start the rebuild process. But, like, they're not going to. So they're going to just be in, you know, retool hell for the next 30 years. That's how they operate as a franchise. But hey, what do I know?
Yeah, it was like interesting seeing those Thomas trade rumors, because I was like, for one thing, it's just like that doesn't seem like a movable asset from any angle, and for another, like, who would he even waive his full NTC to go do anyways?
Yeah. I just, I sit here and I look at this team and just like, Jake Neighbors, he still has a future in the league. It might be a bright one, but definitely, like, not what they expected him to be. Like, Jimmy Snuggerud has been... Him having a significant offensive regression in his D+2 was definitely not what the Blues were hoping for. So, like, with the exception of Thomas, and like maybe if you do trade Robert Thomas, like it has to be, comparable if he is even willing to waive his full NTC. Like you have to get a comparable return to what Buffalo got for, Jack Eichel. So you need, a blue chip prospect, a legitimate top 6 player that could be a captain, and a first round pick coming back the other way at least.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, like, I don't see, like, sure, there's probably a path forward, like, and again, I come back to Anaheim because it's just the roster I know, like, you could probably get fucking Trevor Zegras and Tristan Luneau and a first-round pick for Robert Thomas. But, like, Robert Thomas is not going to want to pay California state income tax. It's just not going to happen. So, they're in a holding pattern for any team that has the assets to go out and get him. And, like, they should have moved on from Falk when they had the chance. They should have bought out Krug when they had the chance. They should have traded Parayko when he was at his most valuable. They should have traded Binnington when he still had value. Like, I don't see why Brandon Saad still plays there. I don't know, man. I'll be critical of this team until I die.
It still just like irks me so much that Doug Armstrong caused all of this. And to his credit, though, he had the self-awareness to recognize that he did put his own job in jeopardy, and yet it was Craig Berube who he forced to take the fall from it and terminated when, like, this is all pretty much of his own doing. This is just ludicrous. He's another one of those executives who, like, I just hate just from observing from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team who is just so limited from just bad managerial. Like, it's so funny how their rivalry with, the Minnesota Wild has just turned into, can the St. Louis Blues become the 2016 Minnesota Wild? And, like, you look at the other side of the coin of the Minnesota Wild's roster right now, a team who's drafted and developed very well, gotten younger very well. And it's just, it's fucking remarkable how you look at the aging blue line in St. Louis and how they've gone out and picked up Ryan Suter. And, you look at the other side of the coin in Minnesota where they've got an aging blue line, but they're also playing, Bill Guerin deserves more credit than he gets for buying out Parise and Suter and taking on the $15 million buyout penalty, but then finding a way on less than $13 million to construct at least a fucking competitive blue line with, Brodin, Middleton, Bogosian, Merrill, Chisholm, Faber. Like, if you're going to do something crazy, like Minnesota, like Guerin did something crazy, and he built a competitive roster despite fucking himself over. Where St. Louis fucked themselves over by just sheer incompetence. It's fucking baffling that they're worse than Minnesota. Like, at this point, like, nobody should be worse than the Minnesota Wild solely because in a hard cap league, the Minnesota Wild are effectively making this shit work with a $68 million roster. Like, how the fuck can you be worse than a team who is literally working without a full deck?
Yeah, it's interesting to say. Like, I think the only time I've ever just been like baffled in the worst way by the Guerin regime was the Charlie Stramel selection. Like, and but they're like pretty much allowed that because it's with the exception, not the rule of the draft process, and just like the innovation that the Guerin regime has, you know, operated with. Uh, that you know the it really just has been pretty impressive. Has made the most absolute most, even exceeded any sort of reasonable expectation within that operating framework.
Yeah, it is crazy to see. Speaking of Stramel, the fact that that's one of those gambles that didn't even give them a fucking glimmer of hope after 1 year later of like him regressing in his D+1 season was I'm laughing about it. And I hope for his sake he can turn it around. You know, I don't really care about it for Minnesota's sake, but like, oh, like that one right there is just not. It's not where you ever want to see as a guy regressing at that, like to the extent that he regressed between D0 and D+1.
Yeah, I can't really say I was particularly surprised by it happening. However, he just has, you see it happen so often, especially in round one and in opportunities, and in situations where there are a lot of opportunities for it. It's just like overvalued based off of a specific like physical attributes profile, and it's just a nebulous concept of tools that really just when there are better or never really pans out. Uh, he, I like the player a lot, but like you kind of saw it taken to an extreme at the ninth overall spot with Detroit taking Nate Danielson with a number of better, more proven forward options on the board. So lower down that same first round, yeah. Fewer premium options, but still an opportunity not to go that route.
Yeah,
The only
I
thing I
mean,
can say though is like, with those slide candidates, like you can't really. There just comes a point where you can't just like eyeball a specific team for passing on guys because like slide candidates are just as likely to pass you by as they are, you know, uh, first game for all. I believe would have been like the best player available at that stage, and it's just like teams are just as likely to benefit from slides as they are to have them serve to their detriment. So it's not even like a Minnesota specific thing anyway.
oh yeah, yeah. Gotta love
21st
slide
overall.
candidates.
So you literally just friggin' was it two? Yeah, 2 picks before Peralta is where Stramel went. Of course, we took Oliver Blanc, although I I think I have to wonder if there, but aside from like the Boston College phobia, which was already established at that point for us, like if there were further politics that put into play there, like we've talked about it plenty of times. Steve Jones and Dale Hunter are basically best friends, and like Jones has a very very strong affinity for any sort of flashy piece that comes out of that. You know, system that where I can imagine that was just very much his guy, and that he had some sort of pitch towards Danny Greer and Brent Flahr. So at least we can kind of know what the screws and bolts are.
Yeah, I mean that, and Oliver Bonk had a really good D0, and he had a really good D1, D+1. Like, I think like Gabe Perreault's going to be a good NHL. I'm gonna backpedal. Gabe Perreault's going to be an NHL player, and he's going to be probably a respectable one at that. But I still don't know if like until the day happens, and we all know how skeptical I am of prospect depth curves. Like at this point, I do think Perreault and Bonk are going to have relatively similar offensive output and production in their careers by the time it's all said and done. That really just comes down to which one of them is better in the defensive and penalty side of things, as well as their role on their respective teams.
Yeah,
As weird of a comp as that is.
which I mean, Bonk, of course, he has like some of his positional woes to resolve, but like really, like his shutdown potential has been like his biggest selling point in terms of immediate and most notable translatability, even with the retooling that needs to be done. It's like you got to think. Like a lot of his points come from him being deployed as a power play bumper option, which, like, defenseman in the NHL is very, very unlikely to be doing that. So it's just like he has promising capabilities that will need to be reconstructed over the next handful of years as a slightly longer depth curve plays itself out.
Absolutely. Definitely, though, one of the picks in that run, really. I mean, yeah. Really looking at the run of defensemen after him, like, knowing that Gulyayev had a down year for Colorado's dev team, like, Bonk definitely had a better year than Molendyk, Lindstein, or Gulyayev. So, like, 1 year out, that's aged pretty well for Philadelphia relative to the other similar positional players taking it around the same point in time, which is always a good sign. Now, realistically, with the exception of Sandin Pellikka, like, probably from the entire run of 18 to 30, he was probably the most, him and Perreault were probably a year out. Were definitely, with maybe some exception to Easton Cowan, the best selections in that run.
Yeah,
And that's mainly because Cowan did better than anybody probably thought he did.
Yeah, he just, well, it would be just outside because ASP was taken at 17th, but I get the general idea of what you're going for. Of course, like, Cowan is interesting because, like, he took steps up based off of, like, the capabilities that he had that weren't as visible in, NHL league models. But, like, I do wonder about him because, like, he's gonna be one of those guys who like he's gonna be a bit more of a delicate forward dev project, I think, because I look at his game. Too many of his points come from him cutting to the middle, which isn't going to fly at the next level. I have to say, like, maybe it's a little biased, but I do think Barkey is the smarter player because, like, a lot of what he does in terms of like facilitating production is like based off of setting up cycles, and it's just like sort of like a passive but intelligent and well thought out and premeditated form of facilitation and involvement in the offensive play. To say nothing of like his PK abilities. His like efficacy in scoring shorthanded goals this year was no accident. So it's like I do think that even bearing in mind the discrepancy in PPG this year and how they kind of flipped, and Cowan might have a better, and he probably does have a better physical profile. I think that I still am of the mind that the value between those two picks, with Cowan going, in the 28th spot versus Barkey at 98. If nothing else, the value of the Barkey selection was a lot better.
Oh yeah, I mean, we all knew that Barkey was phenomenal. I mean, there's always going to be a handful of phenomenal value picks. I mean, overall, that third round last year, for Philly with Barkey, with Zavragin, Vancouver with Brustowitz, just a lot of really good value in the third round last year. Jacob Fowler from Montreal. Like, it's very rare that 1 year after a draft, we're looking at 4 or 5 guys that were taken in the third round that are already on a remarkable upward trajectory. Definitely not the norm in the NHL to see guys going in the right direction this early in their careers.
Yeah, that's one of like the less flashy parts of how good that class was just like the sleeper depth in that almost we don't know for sure yet. In the long run, we might be looking back at this like not only just having great top end, but almost having like a near, if not precise, 2003-esque depth to it 20 years on. It was definitely pretty impressive.
Yeah, man, that 2003 class will always be so special solely because of the lack of like legitimate superstar prospects. Like, with the way that player dev is now, we'll never see a draft that's just so above average across the board over a 7-round window, which is in 2023, and you and I, and we've all known that 2025 is going to be another remarkable class on par with 03, 15, and 23.
Yeah.
Man, if we ever see a first round like 2015 again, I will be pretty fucking surprised. And I know 25 from the various things I've read, there's expectations that 25 could be on par with 15 when all is said and done. And that would be something fucking special, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, remarkably strong at center. The QMJHL is contributing more top end talent than it has in a long time. It's going to be like pretty impressive and like yet understated because like if you're looking at maybe James Haggins and Ivan Ryabkin, and maybe like if he inserts himself back in the conversation when his confidence level jumps up and realizes just how skilled he is, Michael Misa again potentially, like those guys all very good, but maybe not franchise altering in the way you've seen at like the top end of the 2023 class, but like the impressive depth, especially positionally, is going to make itself pretty apparent. People haven't been struck by it yet in that popular sense, even though analysts know very well at this point just how special that class is. People will look back on it, like hockey fans, just retrospectively be like, damn, that was pretty good.
Yeah. And I look forward to seeing, which guys who are going to surprise us and come out of nowhere as late developers as well. It's always one of my favorite parts in classes like that. Shea Weber was one of those guys in that class of 03 all those years ago.
Yep.
What a time. What a time.
Mm.
We still have no idea what goes on with goalie devs anymore. It's beautiful. I will forever dance on Chicago's grave for how bad they are at this. Speaking of guys who had regressions, Adam Gajan, I'm staring suspiciously at you.
Yeah, I tell you, any like issues they have, the tide is not going to turn. You know, based off of that pick, like I actually have to wonder, like it it would be kind of defying expectations to a degree, but like considering his big step down in his D+1 the you know to the extent where like he had to be loaned out to Norway in order to get his confidence back up. But like I just based off of that pretty porous USHL season that Guyan had, like if Chicago would have been better off if they had just gone for it and selected Alexander Helmemo, as like conventional wisdom would have indicated.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was so much that Chicago could have done with that pick.
Yeah, as it turned out, like even if they had reached, because we didn't really know we didn't know that Yegor Zavragin was going to be like freaking uh, on like a Hasek type run in the VHL as an 18-year-old. But like if they had reached and gone out the board and taken him in round 2, that selection would have aged considerably better. Like if nothing else.
It's remarkable how pretty much every goalie taken after Gajan had a really good D+1. Like
Yeah.
Augustine, respectable. Rabel, very respectable. Bjarnason, respectable. I mean, Damian Clara really came on. Zavragin really came on. Jacob Fowler, I think, outperformed what anybody fucking expected of
Yep.
him. Like, holy shit, did that pick age fucking terribly. And even if they didn't go goalie, like Casper Haltonen didn't have a bad D+1. Ethan Gauthier, like right after him, like there were a lot of better options. And knowing how this draft panned out, like Gajan probably would have been available in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
But hey, what do I know? That's going to be a Black Stitch Hockey merchandise piece probably by the fall. Will be a what do I know t-shirt. I think it's getting to a point where that needs to be in our merch store.
Yeah. Yeah, I could get down with that.
It's definitely basically my catchphrase at this fucking point.
Yep.
So I guess, Liam, any other developmental perspectives you have for the week before we slide over to our big finish?
The only thing I can say at this point, really, is that Landon DuPont has still not been signed to his scholarship and development agreement with the Everett Silvertips. I don't even know what to say at this point. Like even like the most cynical Silvertips fans on X are running out of jokes to make about it at this point. So we'll see. In the words of Chuck Miska specifically, like sand through an hourglass, so are the days Everett has to sign Landon DuPont. But for the big finish this week, you know, You know what? I'm actually going to save the one I had in mind originally for another week because it is kind of an evergreen thing, and it's definitely something we want to, keep on the back burner for like a larger discussion. So I'm going to defer for now. So Damien wants to take the floor. He can.
Yeah. So PWHL, Sarah Abstrader, she's signed in Montreal as a third string.
Sandra.
Sandra, I always fucking do that. Carly Jackson got a 1-year extension in Toronto as a third string, and it looks like Claire Budarak, who obviously we're not going to obviously touch the specifics, obviously, but she is coming back to the camp in Minnesota in the summer to see if what she did in the postseason, she should get signed, but besides that, obviously Penguins fans, we're all waiting for the Sidney Crosby extension. A lot of speculation, but seems like they are definitely a lot closer on signing. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the numbers are. But yeah, buddy.
Yeah, don't really have a ton this week. Probably just gonna veer onto the PWHL a little bit. Gotta give PWHL credit for being as a lot of people want them to be better than the NHL in certain regards. No, I'm not taking this where you think I'm taking this. Needing to be better than the NHL in a lot of ways. Seeing Hillary Knight pull up to the ESPYs on a mobility scooter due to a lower body injury, it clearly and obviously happened during the fucking season. A lot of people, for me, that was a bad look because it continues to sustain what I like to call toxic hockey culture of players playing through injuries that they probably shouldn't be playing through, negatively impacting both their future livelihood and that of their teammates in important games. Credit to Hillary Knight for not hiding it and trying to tough it out and, being a good leader, but also I'm still getting very tired of hockey and their inability to be transparent about fucking player injuries across both major professional leagues in North America now.
Yeah. Really tired of what's, what's very, very troublesome and like damaging to the individuals within that culture being seen as some sort of noble act. Um, so basically, I kind of was thinking about this earlier. The Calder race next season. A lot of candidates being kicked around, some flashier than others. This recent top pick obviously being one that's kicked around a lot. I obviously think that you'll have. And looking at my own candidate there, I obviously think you'll have like an immediate pro impact. I think it speaks for itself that Michkov has like a very good, um, pro pedigree already, and has had a taste for the professional level on NHL ice more often than not. He might even have like an environment. He definitely has an environment that lends itself to flourishing more than Celebrini does. Even though if his rookie year is even like just based off of what his individual output and what he can do in that situation is even close to Bedar's. He's going to make a great case for himself, but I won't be surprised if Logan Stankoven ends up taking home the Calder Trophy when all is said and done, because he has been like a fast riser at the pro level. He got a taste of what it takes to compete and have meaningful impact minutes, and actually inserting yourself into a roster and being part of a deep playoff run before he could even be statistically recognized as a rookie. So, so it's like, or having completed his first full year and just having done some really remarkable things. And with him playing on, a very complete team, that with him taking steps up, I won't be surprised to see him having a very, very flashy output relative to his experience level, and to really make a statement as like the most obviously popping you know first official like statistical first year player this coming season. So I definitely think that he's the candidate with the path that's clearest to walk, and I think that whenever like talking about projecting that, it should be something that's very strongly emphasized. So yeah, that about wraps it up. So we do have I did come here with like a little bit of a script because we're at that point with prep and we were able to extract something pretty decent out of it, and you can kind of expect that being the norm going forward as we continue to be as entertaining and stimulating as we can be in these dead weeks. So we'll see you again next weekend. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening on Spotify for the future. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.